When Elvis was born in 1935, there were still many people in Mississippi who were former slaves. His birthplace was a small two-room house, which is nicer today with wallpaper and curtains. In 1935, it was just a simple shelter without plumbing or electricity. Elvis's family worked very hard just to have a basic lifestyle. Vester, Elvis's uncle, wrote about his day in his memoir. He would wake up at 4 a.m. to milk cows, then eat breakfast and work in the fields until 4 p.m. After that, he would milk cows again until 8:30 p.m. Then he would go to bed, and the next day would start all over again. Life was long and tough for Elvis's family. In those days, people had very busy lives. They worked in factories during the day, but at home, they still did a lot of things like they did on farms. They didn't have machines to help them, so everything took a long time. For example, washing clothes wasn't as easy as putting them in a washing machine. Annie Presley remembered, "We had to do our washing on scrub boards. We used 3 tubs, 1 for washing and 2 for rinsing. It was hard work, and then on Saturday night, we used that same tub for a bath. Life was full from morning to night." When Elvis's family was sick, they didn't have money for doctors, so illness was very scary, especially for children. Parents felt helpless because they couldn't help their kids get better. They didn't sit around feeling sorry for themselves, though. They worked hard and did the best they could. Vernon, Elvis's dad, struggled a lot to provide for his family, but he was still proud of their efforts. When someone called them poor white trash, he defended them, saying they might have been poor, but they weren't trash. They were kind and didn't judge others. Even though they didn't have much, they always cared for people. When Vernon was growing up, they didn't treat others badly based on race or social status. Elvis also grew up without prejudice and never put others down. The Presleys and many people in the South believed in something called divine providence. This idea helped them understand their hardships and made them feel hopeful. They were content with what they had and didn't want much more than what they needed. When Elvis was born on January 8, 1935, along with his twin who didn't survive, divine providence gave them comfort. Vernon, Elvis's dad, believed that God told him Elvis would be an only child. They hoped for 2 healthy babies, but they found comfort in their beliefs. There's some confusion about whether Gladys, Elvis's mom, thought she was having 1 baby or 2. The doctor, her husband Vernon, and other family members have different memories. In those times, people didn't need a doctor to have babies at home, and there was no prenatal care. Many women knew how to help with pregnancy and childbirth from their own experiences. Twins were in Elvis's family. Both Gladys and Vernon had twin cousins. In 1978, Vernon said twins were a surprise, but Gladys believed she was having twins because her belly grew faster and bigger than usual, and it was hard for her to move around. People at the Tupelo Garment Company threw a baby shower for Elvis's mom because they knew the Presley family was very poor. This was a normal thing in their community in Mississippi. Elvis learned from this that it's important to help others and care for people in need. The Tupelo community understood that working together and sharing what they had was a way to survive. This was the kind of community Elvis was born into, and they always tried to help each other when needed. On January 8th, when Gladys was having her babies, only Dr. Hunt, who was called to the house, could have known for sure. Her mother-in-law, a midwife, and another woman were also there to help. It's not clear if the midwife called Dr. Hunt because of complications or if they planned to have him there during labor. Since they were very poor and couldn't pay much, it might have been because of complications. Dr. Hunt was an experienced doctor who had been delivering babies in Tupelo since 1913. He arrived in his old Ford Model T, a car made by Detroit in 1927 but still reliable for him. His daughter said he didn't usually examine pregnant women before labor because he thought nature took care of things, and he only charged a lot of money if he did. Since welfare had to pay for the delivery, this was the first time Dr. Hunt examined Gladys, which was during her labor. Vernon remembered it feeling like a very long time ago when a baby, Jesse Garen Presley, was born not alive. This happened in 1935, and it was sad because not much was known about stillborn babies back then. In 1931, 3.8 out of 100 babies were stillborn, and the rate was higher for older women. Gladys was only in her 20s and Vernon was still young too. Losing a baby must have been very shocking and upsetting for them, even if they knew another baby was coming. Some people think that the doctor, Dr. Hunt, might not have tried hard enough to save the first baby because he quickly started focusing on the second baby. But it's hard to know for sure if there were genetic problems or if something simple like clearing Jesse's windpipe could have saved his life. Elvis Presley was born in January 1935, and his parents must have been very happy, even though they had lost a baby before. Elvis was very small, only about 5 pounds, and his mom, Gladys, lost a lot of blood during the birth. They both had to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks, which was a long time back then, especially since most people didn't go to hospitals to have babies. Elvis's dad, Vernon, didn't talk about his feelings during that time, but he must have been very worried about both Gladys and Elvis, just like he was for their lost child, Jesse. Vernon, Elvis's dad, thought his twin boys looked similar but weren't identical. When people heard about the twins, a young girl named Catherine was told to visit the Presleys because they were sad. She expected to see a deformed baby, like a calf that was born wrong. But when she saw Jesse, he looked like any other sleeping baby with no visible problems. This made her feel better, but it also made her wonder why. If there were visible problems, it might have been easier to understand. The issues with Jesse were not something you could see. They were likely connected to the marriage of his grandparents, Bob and Doll, and affected many of their children. Just like his grandparents and parents, Gladys and Elvis seemed healthy and normal on the outside. Elvis had a twin brother named Jesse, but he didn't live long. Jesse was buried in a simple grave in Tupelo, near other Presley family members. His grave doesn't have a special marker. Jesse is likely buried near Noah Presley's grave, who took care of the family. When Jesse was born, only one other grave in the family area was filled, belonging to Noah's daughter, Oma. Later, Oma's mother and Noah were buried there too. At first, they couldn't even afford a gravestone for Jesse, but eventually, he got a nice marker at Graceland, where Elvis is also buried. Jesse's grave is surrounded by the graves of other people who were there when he was born and didn't survive. When Elvis and his twin brother were born, the women from their community were asked to help the family because they needed it. A woman named Janelle McComb, who knew the Presleys and lived in Tupelo, remembered this. Her mom even went to help the Presleys with some baby supplies because they didn't have much money. In those first years of Elvis's life in Tupelo, people in the community were kind and helped each other out. A friend from Elvis's childhood, Guy Harris, said, "It was a community that took care of each other." Dr. Hunt, who delivered Elvis and another special baby in 1935, passed away without knowing the impact he had on history. He didn't know that he helped bring the most famous person ever born in Tupelo, Mississippi, or even in the United States. If Dr. Hunt had read the horoscope for that day, it might have hinted at Elvis's future success in music and poetry. From the very beginning, it seemed like Elvis had everything he needed to find his path in life. The stars were on his side, and he had loving parents who believed in him. In those days, Mississippi might not have been the best place, but with good parents like Elvis had, life wasn't so bad. Jesse Garen, Elvis's twin brother who was born but didn't survive, has also become a subject of stories and legends. Some people say Elvis talked to Jesse's shadow all his life and considered him a close friend. But the truth is, Elvis was an only child and didn't know life any other way. He did wonder why he survived and Jesse didn't, but being a twinless twin didn't bother him much. When people asked him about Jesse later in life, Elvis would say that Jesse was born dead and he never knew him. His friends and family, like cousin Billy Smith and Lamar Fike, say that Elvis wasn't really obsessed with his twin. Gladys, Elvis's mom, didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the loss of the baby twin, Jesse. She wished Jesse had lived so Elvis would have someone to play with. Elvis's childhood friend, Guy Harris, also said he never heard Elvis talk about Jesse. Some people say Elvis visited the twins' grave often, but cousin Lee Clark thinks it's unlikely because the cemetery was far away and there were some dangerous obstacles on the way. So, it seems like the family didn't focus too much on the sadness of losing the baby twin. When someone died in those times, people didn't have much time to be sad. They had to focus on living and taking care of the children who were still alive. Johnny Cash lost his brother and they buried him, but the next day, The whole family went back to work in the cotton field. They had to keep going even on hard days. Life was tough in the South, where cotton was very important. Elvis's mom, Gladys, and dad, Vernon, didn't have time to grieve or adjust to big changes because they needed to survive.